What's up? Old Uncle 2 back with you once again. All right, let's do another weekly outlook. So this week we're going to hit our main two stars, the S&P and Bitcoin, and I think we're going to go ahead and have a nicer look at silver. It's been having some interesting price action lately. Apparently I'm an idiot. We'll get into it. All right. So last week on Bitcoin, I had sort of laid out the larger degree picture just because we had sort of broken structure. It's not really what this weekly outlook is for, but we have sort of established that I personally anticipate, maybe not, it seems not, maybe not most of crypto Twitter, but I anticipate some continued downside before longer resolved bottom. And I think that we've seen price action this week that has supported that. We left off last week with a potential short around this area, but it turned out we got more complex than that and made a higher move into what became a nice shorting opportunity that I alerted the members to earlier this week and have taken advantage of myself so far on a scalp, looking to potentially get back in as we see this green little dilly down here. We'll talk about that. Okay, so and as we see here, I have drawn out a nice little measured move series here on just this proposed third wave. And as we see, this is an extension move, and it's taking us down. Target one of that would take us down to right around just where we dropped the wave 3, based on typical wave 3 projections and things like that. However, we see that if it does just go there sort of in a straight line, which maybe it doesn't, it would be an awkward number of swings to get us there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we won't necessarily concern ourselves with that at this very moment. However, what it would mean is that the potential, as far as we'll reevaluate, when we get there, but there's so many potentials within there. We could even, maybe it takes 2 swings down, so we have that internal structure that we like to get to the third, because we really do structure is really structure and form above all else. Obviously the count, meaning the count structure, the count, and then the form of that count. So one of the options is that it could just be that this was the 4. That is a potential. This would be considered an adequate 4 if you were to measure it out and look at the things that you would expect. However, even in that scenario, we would finish here on, this would technically be 5 waves, but it'd be really weird because it does appear to be 1, 2, 1, 2 here, as we talked about last week. So we'll just have to play it by ear right now. Trend is our friend. We've got the measured move series to really support that. And we, zooming in on this, we'll go down to the 30-minute. Zooming in on this, we see that we came up last week. I think we were around this area that we were finishing up a potential zigzag. So instead of being a finished zigzag here, it turned out that it went for another little fifth, and then this move and another actionary to the upside. So, not to get into the nuance of the countdown here, we could go ahead and hash that out. But really, what I like to focus on is that we see a very, very standard zigzag-looking structure, right? That we see this nice, fat B wave that is not super deep. Very typical that you see this in a B or potentially a 4. Well, clearly this wasn't a 4, right? So this set up very nicely, and I alerted the members to, people were getting bullish over coming up to the top of the parallel here. I just alerted everyone on the trading channel, hey guys, we have high characteristics of a zigzag. Any rejection at the top of this base channel should be taken seriously, and then of course dropping out of the base channel would be even more serious, because of certain things that we look for, that it wouldn't necessarily be a 1, 2, 1, 2, even though we don't have a structure that would really be setting up for that in the first place. And then again, we broke out of the base channel to the downside. So really you had everything here that's set up for this is going to, have some prolonged short potential. I just personally took a small scalp myself during prep for the video, so I hadn't seen it until we broke down to here. And then if we go down even to lower time frame where I like to scalp, we'll put on that is there. As we see, we came into, and I can zoom out, it's even larger, but we came into this POC, and you know, for a scalp of that size, position size, and time frame, is happy with the numbers. Went ahead, covered that, and we'll look to potentially reshort because when this breaks to the downside like that, it is more likely a 3 to the down. Could very well be a C, and this could be a 2 or a B, but just based on the structure we see here, not really expecting that. But we never, you never know for sure, right? What I might like to see in here is that this would finish down, and we're on the degen level, but by the time you see this tomorrow, maybe this is passed by, maybe it's just there. But something like that, a nice 3 wave after finishing this impulsive structure to the downside, nice 3 wave up into resistance, could be very nice. And then you get this oomph to the downside when you do break through that POC. So that could be quite nice, take us down to those levels. So that's what we're going to look for. And then again, when we do start hitting the levels that we have highlighted here with the measured move, things like that, we'll reassess. So we'll look for that this week. Jumping over to the ES last week, I proposed that we would have continued upside before a rejection. Well, we just haven't quite rejected yet. Potentially we will. And in fact, though, the move got so, let's say, high, based on also, you know, we should highlight that this past week was a holiday week here in the U.S. Very thin trading volume. For pretty much the entirety of the week. Markets were only really closed on Thursday, I think half day on Friday, but you know, Christmas and Thanksgiving are the big ones for us here in America. So it was very thin on this end, and there's a lot of obviously the trading volume in the world is out of here, especially in the West. So very thin week, and you see it rose on declining volume, right? So as you can see here, I've also drawn out this upper trading range and lower trading range, and I've also put in some vertical lines, and that's because some of you may know that I do like to do Wyckoff as well, especially when the market is being a little bit unclear in the sense of Elliott Wave, which it is, although because as I've also drawn out here, I'm not leaning into this count. This is just sort of one that is standing out to me as a potential, even though this diagonal drawn, remember last week we were talking about a potential for being A, B diagonal here, but we would have need to come down for a 5th. So we have these 5 swings. We have this move to the upside, breaking that structure. There's a lot of things potentially on the table. And if we come over here into candlestick patterns instead of line, even though line is, you know, just looks a little cleaner at this time frame. Here on candlesticks, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clear swings. And we have none of these have formed a base channel that was able to be broken out of, but we haven't really had a consolidation that would merit that. So, you know, you have to say that's sort of net neutral as far as oftentimes when we don't break out of a base, they can be considered that we're in a corrective move. However, again, because we never formed a corrective that would give us a sort of typical base, I'd say, again, net neutral. But breaking out of this channel, which we seem to be doing now, could mean that we are going to retrace the length of it. The question is has it formed that 7 swings that I just showed there, or the 5? Well, it's actually 9, but that's a 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 swings that we see here. Time will tell. So then we dip into our Wyckoff bag, and we see that not only, and then we also always have, I see this VPVR, visual volume profile range on my chart always, but especially in Wyckoff ranges, I like to get the range of concern on my screen, have the indicator show us that entire range, and I like to use it to signify the supply range in the middle of the range, to overuse the term. But what we see is that it will form when we get down to the lower end of the trading range, and then we break above it. That can be, depending on what has happened before, characteristic of phase D in Wyckoff, right? And that's what we've sort of labeled these vertical lines for: A, B, C, and then D. I'm sorry. Yeah, this isn't drawn exactly perfectly. Anyway, phase D is when we break above it. So C would be when we come down and form this low. D is when we break above. And then E would be, of course, when we would begin markup. So what we're going to look for from a Wyckoff perspective is if we maintain above this support, which was resistance that we have broken through, and then continue on. Will we hold support? So a lot of people might say, oh, I hear this all the time, without consideration of context, because people don't understand volume. They just heard that, volume's highest in wave 3, or, even if they do GAN or something like that. I don't think that maybe it's me. Potentially it's me, but I haven't really, and I don't really look around at what people say, but just folks that I do speak to. I've never seen anybody that really had a great grasp on volume in the crypto space. Again, I don't follow many people, especially that talk about volume. So take it for what it is. Typically, it would be students where I always get the kickback. Basically, whenever I would highlight something like this that could potentially be bullish on declining volume, oh, that's got to be bearish. I disagree, especially if you really study Wyckoff. There are times in which we can resume uptrends again, go through resistance areas on low volume, and then before phase E kicks off is where volume would have to kick back in. We did see, from a Wyckoff perspective, we saw the nice volume spike at the low. There was disagreement on price at this point. Buyers decided it was a value. Sellers were overruled, right? So we see the volume spike here, and price has organically then risen because these buyers at this level were stronger hands. The weaker hands have been removed from the market. So there are not interested sellers, right? So even though there isn't a ton of action, and of course the holiday week sort of throws this all off, not a ton of interested action in this area, that does not mean that, excuse me, by the way, if I didn't mention, I'm sick. That doesn't mean that it isn't potentially bullish, because in the auction process, look at the U.S. housing market, just low supply, prices go up. Same thing, right? So we're going to look for eventual volume to follow through. But right now, we just want to remain, if we want it to, and again, this could be, as far as Wyckoff goes, this could extend out. I just see this as a potential, actually decently looking, Wyckoff count, whereas the Elliott Wave count's a bit unclear, which is where I always typically bust into the Wyckoff. What we're going to look for is to not go back below this now support, which was resistance. If we get back below that support, then we'll look to fade it, and then we would potentially have something where it would be, last week I showed this as a double 3 sideways to this area, and this week I've now changed it to where it's labeled as a flat. Well, we could always, again, there's always so many possibilities left, and that's why when we can narrow down the range of good, let's say probable enough to care about outcomes, down to 1 or 2, let's say 2 generally, and 1 sort of clearly outweighs the other, that's where you can really lean into sort of trades. But for now, if you like to be risky, test of this support area is a potential for a long. Would not be looking to short unless we broke through it, and then on a retest, or whatever the setup looks like when you see it. Now, if we do break back through, again, doesn't mean we're going to go to zero, like so many people would like to say. It would just open back up that realm of possibility, WXY, where this would have been an A, B, C instead of A, B, diagonal that didn't happen. So that's where we're at. The market's kind of, and what's funny is sort of highlighted this out in the charts for the members this week, and that when we came to this resistance area, I showed potentials where we would be finishing up in there, where what turned out to just be, if it does break to the downside, it's W. If it doesn't, then something else. But I showed 2 options where it would do exactly what it did or break straight down. And I said this one made less sense, so it's probably going to be that. There you go. Now, in this particular instance, I would say that both of these outcomes are sort of same for me. Where I might be interested personally in a long is when I see some sort of count forming here that can become actionable for me. I want to see a finished looking corrective wave that finishes above this resistance, with maybe minor spikes down. Otherwise, if we see something break to the downside and get a corrective move up. personally, that's what I would be looking for. Now let's talk silver. Silver's getting quite interesting, quite heated. I posted this chart last week, and I think one of the only comments I got was that I'm a fucking idiot. Turns out you're right. It didn't, because I think that he was more expecting that it was going to 0 or something. But go figure, I thought that we would get a typical 4 in here. However, if we look at it, we see that we got a sideways already in here. So this being sharp was not really out of the realm of expectation. So what I would do personally now is to update this. Even though that looks like a 5 to the downside, at least online, I'd slide that over. And I'd say that we're putting in this 5th now. And the potentials are an expanding diagonal, or which means that could be ending anytime. Let's see. And then, maybe around here is typically where you might expect an ending diagonal, expanding ending diagonal to wrap up. So we'll look for that. Are we getting any divergence? Thought I had you on the chart. Yeah, we are putting in divergence. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that to play out. So yeah, this very well could be an expanding diagonal, in which case, if that happens, that would finish this 5th to there, which would finish this 3rd to there, which would give us a relationship along. Yep, right around the 2618 extension. And then if let's go to log. Okay. Would probably be about at the top of the log channel. That's right. So why we're not looking at that right now. So let's draw. Yeah. So then we could come back down, potentially test the top of this channel. If you're someone that bags silver, on long-term positions like this, as someone who personally bags silver, I think selling for over 60 is a great price, personally. Especially as a hodler who has already sold some this year. Okay, looking to sell some more. Silver's exciting, silver's fun, but it's not going to go on forever. I don't see, let's say, super valid comparisons to this fractal. I mean, I know this is very popular. One thing to take into account, if it does end up being a valid comparison of that, and you get a sharp move to the downside, sort of like Bitcoin usually does, 30% drop, you'll still retrace that 61.8%. So no reason to try to time the top perfectly, because you can always time the retrace perfectly on the high. But me personally, I don't see, even when we do form a local top, which very well could be coming, and then of course we could also sort of break out of this lower degree structure and be much more bullish to the upside. Maybe this was some sort of 1-2-1-2 and this becomes a 3rd, right? And that'll be hard to tell, especially because that 5th is usually going to be in the neighborhood of exactly where a 3rd wave would be for it. So we'll just have to pay attention to the way it comes off of that. Expanding diagonals are pretty rare. And this thing is getting quite extending lately. So you don't want to put all your chips in the basket of ending diagonal at this 3rd wave degree, or even, you could also look at silver in that fractal previously that, you sort of didn't get the typical looking 5 to the high, 1, 2, 3 waves, right? And you can really count the subdivision, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So, that could give you concern here. But again, I still think that this does end up being a 3, 4, 5. Maybe silver just likes 3 waves. I guess that will remain to be determined. But again, I will reemphasize, I love silver, but I think it could potentially be a decent area to start thinking about profits. Really, anytime now, over 60, so good. All right, boys, that's the outlook for this week, and I'll talk to you next week. Toot out.